Family trip to a resort. My sister's family stayed in a 5-star suite while my son and I were sent to a rundown motel. My mother laughed. Did you really think you'd stay in a suite? My sister smirked. A motel suits you better. My son wiped his tears and whispered, Mom, why only us? No one knew this trip would change everything. In a small workroom where the morning sun shone through the window, Rebecca Clark typed in the final code. She stretched and gazed with satisfaction at the completed web design. In her 3rd year as a freelance web designer, she was gradually establishing her own brand. Glancing at the clock, she realized it was almost time for her son Oliver to return from school. Mom, I'm home. 12-year-old Oliver bounded energetically through the front door. He had grown taller, recently reaching his mother's shoulders. His light brown hair was slightly tousled from the wind, and his intelligent eyes were always filled with curiosity. Welcome home, Oliver. How was school today? Rebecca embraced her son. Really great. I gave a presentation in science class. The teacher praised my wind power generator model. Rebecca gently stroked her son's head. Oliver's passion for engineering and design grew stronger each day. She was genuinely proud of her son's talents. That's wonderful. I'd love to see it. She headed to the kitchen and began preparing a simple snack. After the divorce 3 years ago, their life had become simpler, but the bond between them had only grown deeper. Her relationship with her ex-husband Michael was complicated, but they treated each other with respect for Oliver's sake. While eating their snack, Oliver suddenly asked, Mom, did Grandma call? Rebecca hesitated for a moment. Her relationship with her mother, Patricia Clark, wasn't easy. After her husband's death, her mother, a former high school teacher, had become enamored with her sister Ashley's luxurious lifestyle and showed obvious favoritism toward her. Yes, I spoke with her earlier, about next month's family trip. Oliver's eyes lit up. We're going, right? I'm looking forward to seeing Emma and Ryan. Rebecca smiled, though she had mixed feelings inside. Her niece and nephew, the 10-year-old twins Emma and Ryan, were spoiled, but Oliver still enjoyed spending time with his cousins. The phone rang, and Rebecca sighed. The caller ID showed Ashley Griffin. Rebecca, finally got in touch with you. I've made reservations for the family trip. This year will be special. Ashley's voice was always a bit high-pitched and full of confidence. Rebecca sat down in a chair and said, I see. Mother mentioned it briefly. Where are we going? The Ocean View Paradise Resort. I received a special invitation from a VIP client at my salon. It's the kind of place regular customers couldn't even make a reservation for. Ashley's voice was boastful. Rebecca listened quietly. Ashley, as the marketing director for a high-end salon chain, always flaunted her social status and connections. That sounds lovely. How much will it cost? I intend to pay my fair share, Rebecca said calmly. Ashley's laughter came through the phone. Don't worry about it. We'll handle everything. Just keep those dates open. After the call ended, Rebecca gazed out the window. The annual family trip was an event filled with mixed emotions for her. Ashley's family lived luxuriously and were always the center of attention in the family. Her mother, Patricia, excessively praised and supported them. Meanwhile, Rebecca's freelance work wasn't considered a real job. Still, for Oliver's sake, Rebecca wanted to make this trip an opportunity to strengthen family bonds. Actually, she had recently experienced signs of a significant change. She was working on a project request from a major technology company, which could potentially transform her career if successful. But thinking her family wouldn't understand, she hadn't mentioned it to anyone. While preparing dinner, Rebecca felt a warmth in her heart as she looked at Oliver's smile. Hope for a brighter future ignited in her heart. Hey Oliver, I hope the family trip this summer will be enjoyable. Oliver nodded with a carefree smile. Yes, trips with you are always the best, Mom. As Rebecca hugged her son, she renewed her determination to protect him and make him happy, no matter what might happen. Mom, look, the ocean. Oliver leaned out of the car window, pointing at the blue horizon stretching before them. Under the bright California coast sun, the Ocean View Paradise Resort gradually came into view. Rebecca gripped the steering wheel lightly and smiled. It's beautiful, she said, though complex emotions swirled inside her. 2 hours earlier, they had met with the family at the airport, and Ashley had announced a small change in the rental car arrangements. You'll need to rent a separate car. We have a VIP shuttle service, Ashley had said, pushing up her sunglasses. Mother Patricia had accepted this as perfectly normal. Now the grand white resort hotel appeared before them. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, and magnificent fountains adorned the entrance. Oliver's eyes reflected genuine excitement. Rebecca carried their luggage into the lobby. Ashley's family and her mother had already arrived and were seated on luxurious sofas. The twins, Emma and Ryan, were absorbed in their expensive tablets, while James was having an important-sounding conversation on his phone. We've been expecting you, Miss Griffin. The front desk staff bowed politely. Your VIP suite is ready. Our dedicated staff will escort you shortly. Ashley turned to her mother with a proud smile. Mom, your suite is next to ours. The view is amazing. Patricia nodded happily and noticed Rebecca and Oliver. Oh, you finally made it. Traffic was heavy, Rebecca replied quietly. She started to approach the reception desk. Will we be staying at the same hotel? Oliver asked in a small voice, with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Rebecca gently embraced her son's shoulders and answered, I hope so. In truth, she hadn't been given detailed information. She had to trust Ashley's words that everything had been arranged. As Rebecca approached the reception desk, Ashley grabbed her arm. Wait a minute. Her voice was low with something hidden behind her smile. Your accommodations are outside the resort. This main hotel is over your budget. What are you talking about? Rebecca asked in surprise. I said I would pay for the trip. The amount you can afford is limited, her mother interrupted. We're here on a special invitation, thanks to James's business connections. The color drained from Rebecca's face. The woman at the reception turned to her with a confused expression. Miss Clark, I'm sorry, but your reservation is not for this hotel, but for our sister facility, Sunset Motel, the woman said apologetically. Sunset Motel? Rebecca repeated. Where is that? It's about a 15-minute drive from the resort, the woman answered. A shuttle bus runs every 30 minutes. Ashley shrugged. Sorry, but this is for the best. This hotel is too expensive for you. I said I would contribute money, Rebecca said, trying to control her anger. Why didn't you tell me beforehand? We came for a family vacation. Did you really think so? Mother Patricia laughed coldly. Did you think you could stay in a 5-star hotel suite? Be realistic. Those words pierced Rebecca's heart. She took a deep breath, trying to control her emotions. Oliver gripped her hand tightly. Looking up at the luxurious decorations in the resort lobby, watching his cousins run around happily, tears welled up in his eyes. Why just us? Oliver asked in a trembling voice. His small voice broke Rebecca's heart. Ashley wore a satisfied smile and sarcastically remarked, The motel suits you better. You're used to a simple life, aren't you? Mother gave her daughter a stern look for a moment, but quickly returned to her usual expression. Rebecca, I understand your anger, but this is reality. We all stay in places that match our standing. Brother-in-law James hurriedly tried to mediate. Well, the Sunset Motel isn't bad. I hear it's old but clean. Besides, we can spend the days together, right? Rebecca took a deep breath to control her emotions. It's okay, Oliver. We'll have a good time. She tried to put on a brave face for her son. However, her voice trembled slightly. Oliver was trying hard to hide his tears. I'm fine. I don't mind the motel, he said, trying to sound cheerful. Rebecca received the keys from the receptionist and checked the shuttle bus schedule. Ashley's family had already picked up their luggage and were heading toward the elevator. Her mother, perhaps feeling a bit guilty, approached them. Dinner is at 6. In the resort's main restaurant, Patricia said. Don't be late. Rebecca nodded silently. She had a lot she wanted to say, but didn't want to argue in front of Oliver. While waiting for the shuttle bus to take them to the motel, Rebecca reflected on her life choices. Just 30 minutes ago, she thought this trip would be an opportunity to strengthen bonds with her family. But she was hurt by this cold treatment. She was reminded once again that she was always treated as second class within her family. The Sunset Motel was as expected, old and run down. The single-story building had an atmosphere reminiscent of 1970s America with a rusty sign swaying in the wind. Entering the room, Oliver quietly sat down on the bed. Mom, why do Grandma and Aunt Ashley dislike us? Rebecca's heart nearly broke. They don't dislike us. It's just she struggled for words. She sat next to her son and put her arm around him. Sometimes people judge others by their money or status. But that's not what really matters. I'd rather be with you than in a fancy hotel, Oliver said bravely. Rebecca hugged her son. Thank you, Oliver. Me too. Just then there was a sudden knock at the door. Rebecca stood up confused, parted the curtains slightly to look outside. A stranger was standing there. She cautiously opened the door. Miss Clark? I apologize, but there seems to have been some trouble during check-in. A middle-aged man with a suntanned face stood there with a kind smile. I'm Matthew Harrington, the owner of this motel. Rebecca sighed. Yes, there was a situation. We're staying here due to arrangements made by my family. Matthew appeared thoughtful for a moment. Actually, I'd like to speak with you if that's all right. Rebecca sensed something like a change of fate in his sincere eyes. Please come in. Rebecca hesitantly opened the door and invited Matthew Harrington inside. Oliver watched the unfamiliar visitor with curious eyes. Matthew politely removed his hat and entered the room. His suntanned skin and strong hands suggested a life not confined to desk work. First, I must apologize. It seems the directions to the motel weren't smooth, Matthew said in a sincere voice. Actually, I'm not only the owner of this motel but also the owner of the entire Ocean View Paradise Resort. Rebecca's eyes widened in surprise. Why would the resort owner be at this old motel? Matthew smiled. I sometimes come here to see the true face of the resort. There are views you can't see from luxurious rooms. He slowly pointed outside the window. The sunset visible from there is, in my opinion, more beautiful than the view from the high floors of the resort. Oliver eagerly looked out the window. Indeed, the ocean painted with the sunset was as beautiful as a painting. I was curious when I saw your reservation, Matthew continued. A family trip, yet why different accommodations? After learning the situation from the front desk report, I came to meet you directly. Rebecca thought for a moment, then honestly explained the situation. Her relationship with her sister, her mother's attitude, and the treatment this time. She tried to control her emotions, but her voice trembled slightly. "I'm sorry you had such an unpleasant experience," Matthew said sincerely. "The original purpose of this resort is to deepen family bonds. And yet we're fine," Rebecca said, trying to be strong. "Oliver and I can enjoy ourselves anywhere." Matthew turned to Oliver and smiled gently. "What are you interested in?" Oliver's face brightened. "I like engineering and design. I recently made a model of a wind power generator. And I help with my mom's work too, like website design." "Is that so?" "That's amazing," Matthew said with a genuinely impressed expression. "Actually, I was an engineer when I was younger too." Rebecca felt her tension ease as she watched her son and the mysterious owner talk. Matthew listened seriously to Oliver's conversation, asked questions, and drew out his knowledge. Their conversation gradually became more intense, moving to specialized topics. "If you don't mind," Matthew turned to Rebecca during a break in the conversation, "would you share your thoughts on my new project tomorrow? I heard you're a web designer." Oliver's eyes sparkled. "Really? Of course, I'd like to hear Oliver's opinion too." "A young perspective is valuable," Matthew said with a serious face. It wasn't an adult's pretense to soothe a child, but a genuine sincerity in wanting to know his thoughts. Rebecca considered for a moment. She had to attend dinner with her family. However, this conversation with the owner strangely lightened her heart. "Thank you. I'd be delighted," she answered. Matthew stood up and handed her his business card. "Let's meet at the motel office at 9 tomorrow morning. I'll guide you from there." After he left, Oliver jumped around excitedly. "Mom, that's amazing. The resort owner? He seems like a really nice person." Rebecca smiled while looking at the business card. "Yes, he does." That night's dinner with the family was uncomfortably as expected. Ashley talked incessantly about their luxurious suite rooms, and James stepped away several times for important phone calls. The twins were noisy, hardly ever corrected by their parents. "How's the motel?" Ashley asked with a sarcastic smile. "Hope there aren't any bedbugs." Rebecca tried to stay calm. "It's actually a lovely place. Especially the sunset view from the window is beautiful." "Oh, your standards are that low?" Ashley laughed. Rebecca looked at Oliver. He was eating his meal quietly. "Oliver, we have special plans for tomorrow," she said brightly. "Really? What are you doing?" Mother Patricia asked. "We have an appointment to meet with the resort owner," Rebecca said. The conversation at the table paused for a moment. Ashley asked with an incredulous expression, "The owner? You're joking, right?" "It's true. He even came to the motel. Wasn't that just a local staff member?" James asked doubtfully. Rebecca shrugged. "His name is Matthew Harrington. He was a very kind person." James dropped his fork. "Harrington?" His voice suddenly became respectful. "His name is legendary in the West Coast real estate development industry. He was the owner." Ashley's expression changed. "This is just a joke, right? Why would he meet with you?" "He seemed interested in my web design work," Rebecca answered quietly. "We're scheduled to discuss his new project tomorrow." The family's reaction was complex. Ashley was clearly jealous. Mother Patricia was confused. Only James suddenly began to show an unusual interest in Rebecca. "If you don't mind, could I come along?" James suddenly suggested. "If it becomes a business discussion, my experience might be helpful." Rebecca smiled. "I'm sorry, only Oliver and I were invited." The next morning, Rebecca and Oliver met Matthew at the motel office. He guided them to a non-public area of the resort. A temporary office was set up in one corner of a massive construction site. "This is my new project," Matthew pointed to the vast property. "It's an expansion plan for Ocean View Resort. However, it's not just an expansion. I want to create more diverse family-oriented facilities. And with that, I want to completely renew our digital presence." Rebecca was shown the project models and plans. "I've seen your design work," Matthew suddenly said. "It's exactly the sense I've been looking for." Rebecca was surprised. "How did you see my work?" "I heard you were recently involved with Blue Ocean Technologies project. I'm one of the investors in that company." Rebecca gasped. Her secret major project had caught his eye. "Your designs are user-centered and have excellent aesthetic sense. Would you consider taking charge of my resort's digital strategy?" Rebecca was speechless. "That's a big deal. I'll prepare a formal proposal. You'll need time to think," Matthew said calmly. Meanwhile, Oliver was fascinated by the construction site model. Matthew introduced him to the project manager, and Oliver began sharing his ideas for children's facilities. "Oliver has a sharp insight," Matthew told Rebecca. "I'd like to hear his ideas as well." "He's always creative," Rebecca proudly replied. "He helps with my work too." Matthew said with a serious expression, "You seem destined to become a promising engineer." Oliver blushed but looked pleased at those words. In the afternoon, Rebecca and Oliver joined the family at the resort pool. Their expressions were clearly different from the morning. "Oh, Rebecca, how was the meeting with the owner?" Ashley's voice was mixed with sarcasm. "It was actually wonderful," Rebecca answered calmly. "He asked me to work on a project." "You're lying, right?" Ashley said with a half-laugh. At that moment, Matthew entered the pool area. He was dressed casually, but the staff greeted him with respect. He noticed Rebecca and Oliver and approached them. "Rebecca, Oliver, the preparations for our next meeting are ready," Matthew said with a smile. The entire family froze. Mother Patricia asked in surprise, "Rebecca, do you know this person?" "Yes, Matthew Harrington. We're working on a project together," Rebecca answered confidently. James opened his mouth with a surprised expression. "Harrington? The owner of Ocean View Resort?" Matthew nodded with a smile. "That's right. And soon, we'll be using Rebecca's talent for the resort's new digital expansion." He placed his hand on Oliver's shoulder. "I'm also greatly looking forward to Oliver's ideas." Ashley's face turned pale. Mother Patricia looked confused, shifting her gaze from one daughter to the other. Inside Rebecca's heart, something was beginning to change. This wasn't just about a job. It was a moment when her value, her choices were finally being recognized. And more than anything, seeing Oliver standing proudly beside her, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The next morning, Rebecca was drinking coffee on the small terrace of the motel. Yesterday's events seemed like a dream. The conversation with Matthew, his project proposal, and the recognition in front of her family. After a night, they were still real. "Mom, I'm up." Oliver came outside with a sleepy face. The morning sun dyed his hair golden. "Good morning." Rebecca stroked her son's head. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes." "Will we see Matthew today too?"
Rebecca smiled.
"Yes. He said he'd bring a formal proposal this morning." Oliver jumped happily. "Will he listen to my ideas too?" "I'm sure he will." After breakfast, Matthew appeared as promised. He was carrying a thick envelope. "Good morning," he smiled at Rebecca and Oliver. "I may have surprised you in front of your family yesterday." Rebecca laughed softly. It was a bit unexpected, but not in a bad way. They sat on the motel's small patio. Matthew opened the proposal and began explaining. It was a contract that would change Rebecca's career. Seeing the one-year contract amount, she gasped. "This is not just a temporary project," Matthew said with a serious expression. "I'm thinking of a long-term partnership. I want to rebuild Ocean View Resort's digital strategy from scratch." Rebecca looked at the contract and was amazed. The contract amount was orders of magnitude larger than any contract she had ever seen. "This might be too much for me," she said honestly. Matthew gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You're underestimating your value. I believe in your talent." And he continued, "Actually, I have one more request. Oliver's ideas were brilliant too. I'd like him to participate as a youth advisor." Oliver jumped up in excitement. "Really? Will my ideas be helpful?" "We need a young perspective like yours." Matthew smiled gently. "Of course, within the scope that doesn't interfere with your studies." Rebecca's heart warmed seeing her son's joy-filled face. "Let me think about it. It's a big decision." Of course, Matthew showed understanding. "Take your time to consider during your stay." Also, he hesitated slightly. "Tomorrow night, I'm planning a special dinner at the resort. I'd like to invite your entire family." Rebecca was surprised. "The entire family?" "Yes, if that's all right." His eyes were full of sincerity. "Thank you. I'll let them know." That afternoon, Rebecca informed her family about the invitation. Ashley and James's reactions were as expected. Ashley pretended to be happy on the surface, but jealousy was visible in her eyes. James sensed a business opportunity and suddenly began to show friendly behavior. Patricia had a complex expression. "Rebecca, is it true?" Her mother quietly asked. "The job offer from that owner?" "Yes, Mom. He highly values my design work," Rebecca answered calmly. "I see." Her mother stumbled over her words. "I've never really looked at your work properly." The next day, dinner at the resort's upscale restaurant. Matthew had invited everyone as guests. The private dining room was decorated with flowers, and the twilight sea was visible from the windows. "First, I want everyone to know," Matthew began speaking in a calm voice. "Rebecca has agreed to become the creative director for my resort's entire new digital strategy." The color drained from Ashley's face. "What? And Oliver will participate as a junior consultant for our youth-oriented programs." Matthew smiled gently at Oliver. Mother Patricia looked at Rebecca with a confused expression. "But you're just a freelancer." "Mom, I'm not just a freelancer. I take pride in my skills and creativity," Rebecca answered quietly but firmly. "This contract promises a reward worthy of Rebecca's talent," Matthew continued. "Just the first year will be a 7-figure contract." Gasps were heard around the table. James stood up with a pale face. He stepped away to make a phone call. Matthew looked toward Rebecca and nodded slightly. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, "of your and Oliver's new life." Late that night, Rebecca and Oliver were walking with Matthew on the resort's private beach. The starry sky stretched above, and the sound of waves echoed quietly. "It's been quite a day," Matthew said, looking up at the starry sky.
Rebecca nodded.
"My family was in shock, especially Ashley. They never tried to see your talent and value." "That's their loss," Matthew said gently. While Oliver was collecting seashells a little distance away from them, Matthew took Rebecca's hand. "Rebecca, over these few days, I've developed feelings beyond just a business partner." Rebecca blushed but looked straight into his eyes. "I feel the same." Oliver came running and jumped between them. "Look! I found a beautiful shell." The three laughed together as they walked under the moonlight. Rebecca quietly vowed in her heart. Never again would she doubt her own value. 1 year later, Ocean View Resort had been transformed. Rebecca's newly designed digital platform had increased reservations by 50% compared to the previous year, becoming a topic of conversation in the industry. Matthew entered her office. The old motel had now been renovated into the resort's Digital Innovation Center, becoming Rebecca's creative office. The beautiful sunset was still visible from the window. "The project's success is thanks to you and Oliver," Rebecca smiled. Their relationship had developed beyond work, and Matthew had become an important part of Rebecca and Oliver's lives. Oliver genuinely adored Matthew, and the weekends the three spent together had become their treasure. Meanwhile, it had been a tough year for Ashley and her family. James's business partner's fraud was exposed, and the company collapsed. Although he wasn't directly involved, his social credibility plummeted. From a luxurious life, they were forced into a modest lifestyle. One Sunday, Rebecca visited her family home after a long time. Mother Patricia was waiting for her at the entrance. She seemed calmer than before, and a bit older. "Rebecca," her mother said in a small voice, "I'm truly sorry. I've misunderstood you all this time." "Mom, that's in the past. What matters is the future," Rebecca embraced her mother. Patricia wiped away tears. "I never thought that Trip would change everything like this. Life tends to move in unexpected directions." Rebecca laughed softly. Reconciling with Ashley was more difficult. She couldn't honestly acknowledge Rebecca's success, and the atmosphere was tense at their first reunion. "You were just lucky," Ashley said bitterly. Rebecca smiled calmly. "That's not true. I've always known my value. I just didn't need to prove it to others." Matthew supported Rebecca, and also extended a hand to Ashley's family. He offered James work on some resort projects and created opportunities for Ashley to use her marketing skills in new ways. Although Ashley initially refused stubbornly, she gradually began to accept reality. That Christmas, Rebecca and Matthew invited the entire family to the resort. This time, everyone received the same treatment. Oliver proudly said, "If we hadn't spent those days at the motel, we wouldn't be where we are today." The family relationships weren't completely healed, but the old wounds were beginning to mend. Mother Patricia now showed equal love to all her grandchildren, and Ashley was slowly beginning to change. What Rebecca valued most was the confidence gained through this experience. Sometimes people lose sight of their own worth. But true value isn't in others' evaluations but within yourself, she told Oliver. Matthew put his arm around her shoulder and added, "And sometimes meeting someone who recognizes that value can change your life." Looking at the sunset sinking into the sea, Rebecca thought, sometimes life's greatest blessings come from the most unexpected places.